Happy New Year and good evening, and welcome to the Tuesday, January 7th, 2025 regular business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with all council members present. You will see that there is one seat up here that is vacant. That is because former council member Lisa Parsley has now joined the Washington State House of Representatives, and so we have a vacancy on the City Council, and we'll be discussing the appointment process for that later in the evening, and we hope to have a new member seated with us here on the dais come next Tuesday. So, just wanting to take a moment to acknowledge the tragedy that happened this past week. So I just want to kick things off by acknowledging the tragic events that happened last week in New Orleans. Obviously, a person that was driven by hatred and extremism used a vehicle and firearms to attack revelers as they celebrated the New Year on Bourbon Street. 14 people were killed, and about 35 people were also injured. And the community has been left traumatized, and our nation is heartbroken. And the city of Olympia sends our condolences to the city of New Orleans. And we are saddened by our losses, by their losses, and we are awestruck by their resilience and their grit. And through the floods, through the storms, and the sickness, and through this brutal attack, the Big Easy rises in signature style, and we expect to see that. I ask that the Olympia community join me and the City Council in sending our support and good wishes to the city of New Orleans, and we wish them well. So with that, I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have an agenda. So our first item this evening is item 2A, which is special recognition. A poetry reading we'll be receiving from our poet laureate, Kathleen Bird, and here to present this evening is Stephanie Johnson, the city's arts program manager. Hi, Stephanie.
Thank you, Mayor Payne and members of council. I'm Stephanie Johnson, Arts Program Manager with Olympia Parks, Arts and Recreation, and I'm delighted to be here today with Olympia's fourth Poet Laureate, Kathleen Bird. Olympia's Poet Laureate program has goals which include promoting poetry as an art form, expanding access to the literary arts, connecting the community to poetry, promoting poetry as a community voice that contributes to a sense of place. And in addition, Kathleen's term addresses the theme to utilize the power of poetry and language to contribute to thoughtful response and centering around our environment and climate change. To date, Kathleen's term started a year ago this July. And to date, she's been a featured reader at the Olympia Poetry Network, conducted a climate writing workshop with Thurston Youth Climate Coalition, coordinated a collaborative event with paintings and poetry at the Spring 2024 Arts Walk, participated in the 2024 Washington Center Salon, also conducted a poetry reading at the Fall Arts Walk in 24, facilitated 5 poetry reading groups and 5 poetry writing workshops. And if anyone's interested in participating, her next workshop is coming up January 22nd from 4 to 5:30 p.m. It's poetry reading with the selected book being Conversations with Cagawan River by Sophie Ann Edwards. And they can register for, or you can register for the workshop on the Poet Laureate page on the City of Olympia website. And with that, I'd like to introduce Kathleen Bird.
Thank you for that introduction, Stephanie. It's been a real honor to serve as the city's Poet Laureate, and I've just really enjoyed all the opportunities to share my own poetry, but also to witness people writing and sharing their poetry at the events, and particularly to bring a youth into the conversation around climate change through poetry. I've brought 2 poems to share with you this evening. One of them is by Czesław Miłosz, who was a Polish-American poet who died in 2004. He grew up in Warsaw under German occupation, and then he came into the U.S. in exile after he was threatened by communist authorities. And this poem is called Incantation. Human reason is beautiful and invincible. No bars, no barbed wire, no pulping of books, no sentence of banishment can prevail against it. It establishes the universal ideas in language and guides our hand so we write truth and justice with capital letters, lie and oppression with small. It puts what should be above things as they are. It is an enemy of despair and a friend of hope. It does not know Jew from Greek or slave from master, giving us the estate of the world to manage. It saves austere and transparent phrases from the filthy discord of tortured words. It says that everything is new under the sun, opens the congealed fist of the past. Beautiful and very young are Philosophia, and poetry, her ally in the service of the good. As late as yesterday, nature celebrated their birth. The news was brought to the mountains by a unicorn and an echo. Their friendship will be glorious. Their time has no limit. Their enemies have delivered themselves to destruction. And then I brought a much whimsier poem that I wrote myself. And this is published in my new book, Last Resort. I don't know how the mud flats or how the prairie grasses, how the garlic scapes or the beet greens above the soil. I don't know how the blueberries or how the wind picks up and carries on in a maelstrom, how the nightmares or the morning dews. I don't know how the river knows its way back to the sea, but I do know gravity, the weight and heft of the thing, of living, that is, how tenderly you can fall into grass and hope, despite all signs otherwise, that the world will turn. Though I don't know how the world turns, only that it does. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. It's good to see you again. Any comments from council? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Just more gratitude. What a great way to welcome in our first meeting of the year. I'm sure there's a reason you chose those two, though I shouldn't assume. But for me, coming into this year is both professionally, personally, and otherwise, is a lot about kind of maintaining and figure out what I can do that's in my control, and those two spoke to that, and so yeah, that was nice. Also, as a part of our council packet and preparing to have you present to us tonight, we get a run through of what you've been up to. And you've been up to a lot, and so thank you so much for the creative ways that you've found to hold this role and involve community members, and hopefully I'll see you at the last couple of events that you have in the next 6 months. Particularly interesting is the Anthology of Olympia Poets. Yeah, I had to look, anthology. Yeah, but really cool, very creative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Gilman.
Kathleen, thank you for the words. Now I know how the catbirds, and the blueberries. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you've done and what each of our previous poets have done to help not only elevate the spoken word, but also make the invitation to so many people across the community to play with language. So I'm just grateful for that. Thank you.
Any additional comments? Mayor Pro Tem, you took the word out of my head, which I was thinking of, which is the word control, when I was listening to you read your poem. And I think, first of all, it's really, it takes a certain level of humility to admit what you don't know. So as you were talking about what you didn't know, that was what stood out for me and also that it's a reminder that you don't have to know everything, right? And I think sometimes we want to know it all because we want to control. It's human instinct. Also, a certain level of human preservation is that we want to know so that we can manipulate and control what's happening around us as a survival mechanism. And to listen to your poem, I think, is really speaking to that fact that we can still do what's within our control without having to know everything, and that there's a certain level of peace, I think, in surrendering to that and giving it up. At least that was my interpretation of it. And so I just appreciate you sharing your words. And Mayor Pro Tem, you said it beautifully of all the work that you've done the past year. So thank you, Kathleen. Good to see you again. Okay. So if there are no additional questions, we will move on to the public comment section of our meeting. Thank you again, Kathleen, very much. Looks like we have one person signed up in chambers this evening. And please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. It looks like Mariah Rode or Maria?
That would be online.
Online, okay.
And Mariah is not signed up, or Maria
Okay,
is not in the queue.
all right. And we don't have anyone signed up for public comment in chambers either. Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. So with that, we will move on to adoption of the consent calendar. Any questions, comments, or pulls on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I need a motion to adopt this evening's consent calendar.
I'd move to adopt the consent calendar as published.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the consent calendar as published signify by saying aye. Aye. We have consent calendar. So that takes us to our only business item this evening, which is item 6A, which is the approval of the appointment process for the applicants to interview for the vacant city council position, seat number 5. And presenting this evening on this is Kelly Purse-Brassett, the city's strategic communications director. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, good evening and Happy New Year, Mayor Payne, council members. For the record, I'm Kelly Purse-Brassett, Strategic Communications Director. I'm here to tee up your conversation this evening on the candidates and process for appointment to the current council vacancy. As a way of background for members of the community who might be listening in, and as the mayor mentioned earlier, council position number 5 became vacant on December 31st, 2024, when Councilmember Lisa Parsley, former Councilmember Lisa Parsley, stepped down following her election to the state legislature on November 5th. Council appointed a subcommittee to guide and manage the appointment process. The subcommittee met on November 22nd to confirm an appointment process, a timeline, an application, and desired qualifications. And this is what that process looks like and timeline. As you can see, the election was certified on November 26th, and we could officially open applications on November 27th. The subcommittee met on December 9th again to confirm the application evaluation matrix for you all when you got your applications and to shape some draft interview questions for your consideration. On December 13th, or by the December 13th deadline, council had received 24 applications. 22 were moved forward for consideration because 2 of the applicants did not meet the state's residency requirements. So council reviewed and ranked applications in order of interest to interview and forwarded their individual rankings to staff by December 30th. And this is what that looks like in alphabetical order. And then back to the process this evening. Council has a couple of things to do. You need to consider the applications for the first time as a body and decide on who to invite to interview next Monday, January 13th. You also need to consider and confirm an interview process or interview format that you want to use and a decision-making process to use to arrive at a final appointee. The subcommittee, the appointed subcommittee recommended using the ranked choice voting process, and those members can speak to that. I'll let that happen. But before I hand it off to you guys for your discussion, I just want to make a reminder to you all for this evening and also for January 30th that your deliberations and your decision-making must take place in an open public meeting like this. However, you may call an executive session to discuss candidate qualifications at any time during the process. So with that, I'm going to step back and leave it to your discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Kelly. So just a few things I just kind of wanted to mention at the top to kind of help get us started with this conversation. So we did just do this just a year ago, by the way, and we have Councilmember Vanderpool now as a result of doing this process. There's actually a handful of steps that I think will help us sort of move through the conversation. The first is to decide on the number of applicants, then decide who to interview, then decide how we want to conduct those interviews, as Kelly said. Then we make a decision on the ranked choice voting recommendation, whether or not we will stick with that, and then we will make a motion to adopt the slate of candidates that we select for interview. So that's just kind of to summarize just how the flow of the discussion. I do want to mention that this is only for deciding who to interview. We will not be discussing the questions that we'll be asking of the candidates or any of the nature of the topics or anything like that this evening. This is just to decide who to interview and how. So with that, happy to turn it over to anyone who'd like to discuss, the number of applicants. I will say earlier today in agenda setting, it was mentioned that the first 8 candidates were on the list that we were sent via email by Kelly. Thank you, Kelly, by the way, for consolidating all of our rankings to give us an idea of where we were mostly aligned, and the top 8 were where we were closely aligned. And so therefore that's sort of a number that we could throw out there in terms of how many candidates to interview. I do see that as a reasonable amount, and it is one more additional person. If you were to look at the number of council members, for example, there are 7 members. We will interview 8 candidates. So I think that is sort of one way of looking at why we would choose that number. So it'd be one additional candidate into the number of council positions. And then there's also, just to really think about how we've ranked the applicants, where we're mostly aligned, and whether or not it makes sense to offer those candidates to interviews. So any thoughts on that? Councilmember Gilman.
I just, as I look at the numbers, I don't see that it's 8 that are most closely aligned. I see it's 10, and then there's a jump. But that the 9th and 10th person are closer in the grouping than some of the gaps between the first 8. So I would just suggest that they're actually, and so we can decide whether or not it's unwieldy to consider 10 people, but I would say that there's 10 that are bunched sort of together.
Yes.
Here, so.
Councilmember Vanderpool.
Before can I ask the question if it's possible, if we do 8 or we do 10, would we do that in 2 sets, or would we do that so that's that time-wise, that's the thing I'm thinking about. If we did 5 people seating versus.
Yes, that's the next part of the discussion, once we decide how many we think is appropriate to interview for the
Okay.
position. Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
Yep. So, thank you for that clarification, Councilmember Gilman. So there are 10 applicants where we're mostly aligned, but what we did discuss in agenda setting was the number 8. And, you know, I tend to think of it for the reasons that I just stated earlier. But sure, I'm open to obviously interviewing 10 if we feel like that's where we want to go. But certainly open to hearing different thoughts. 8, 10, any thoughts? Anyone?
Mayor,
Yes.
Yeah,
Councilmember Cooper.
thank you, Mayor Payne. 10 is a lot. Like if I was doing a hiring, I would go for 5 or 6. And I feel like in the 5 or 6 range is, I mean, it's hard because they're kind of tight. So, I mean, if people want to do 8 or 10, it's certainly not out of precedent for us. Like, I think the Mayor Pro Tem reminded me we invited 6 people last year and only 4 showed up for the interview. But I believe when we appointed Councilmember Gilman, we had 2 panels of people and it was like we interviewed 10 or more maybe. Does that sound right to your recollection? Like we can fit that in a night is just what my mind is doing.
I believe you had 3 panels on that night, 3 panels of 4.
Okay, so we interviewed 12 people, yeah. Okay, and I think it was similar when we did Councilmember Hankins. So I like it. It was a clearer choice and an easier, it's easier to make the decision with a smaller group of really qualified people, in my opinion. But if people want to do 8 or 10, that's totally reasonable.
City Manager Bernie.
Would it help to put the rankings that you're all talking about up on the screen so those that are watching at
You
home
beat me to it. I was
can
just
see
going
what you're
to.
talking about?
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's a great point. A smaller qualified pool makes sense as well. Councilmember Madrone.
The middle ground here seems to be 8. And because last time we did this, we had somebody cancel last minute because they were sick and somebody else cancel last minute for an unknown reason. And then we ended up with a smaller group of people to evaluate from. I think there's a little bit of, just a little bit of a buffer in there. If we do have a couple of people who just can't make it at the last minute.
I like that. Thank you. Councilmember Gilman.
I was just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if you were going to comment on the depth and the interest across these 22 applicants and how, I mean, we could, there's something interesting about all 22 people. So we have to choose, but I just thought, if you wanted to praise this whole list and the people who took the time to apply, that'd be all right.
Yeah, I figured we would get there at the conclusion of the discussion, and maybe get there once we decide on process, and then we can talk about the quality of candidates we got, and then wrap up the conversation that way. But yes, thank you. That's a good point. We always want to acknowledge the folks that took the time to actually apply. Yes, so I like the idea of where we're going with 8 applicants, considering we need a few extra, but also a middle ground between what I'm hearing of 6 and 10. So are we aligned with 8? Okay. All right. So next is to decide which 8 candidates to interview. And Councilmember Gilman, you just raised a good point that obviously we don't necessarily want to go in consecutive order of 1 through 8 maybe, because the candidates that were 9 and 10 are closely ranked, maybe more than some of the others. So to that point, we need to make a decision of who to interview in those 8 slots. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I'd be happy for it to just be randomized. It could be, No, I'm interpreting the mayor as saying we are selecting the top 8, and then within the 8th, how to split them between 2 panels. Is that? Is that what you're saying?
Not quite. But yes, I am open to that, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
Right now, we just need to decide who to interview. And from my understanding, from what Councilmember Gilman was saying, is that the candidates that are 9 and 10 on the list are actually ranked closer by the way that council has ranked them than the first 8. And so, for example, if we just went, okay, so we're going to interview 1 through 8, does that make sense if 9 and 10 are more closely ranked? So, just food for thought on what we want to do here. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Thank you for the clarification, Mayor. May I revise my comments? So I really appreciate that we took the time to rank all of the applicants and not just put forward who we thought the tops were, because we did have some varying rankings here, and so. I'm seeing on the total rankings, and in this case, the lower numbers being the top candidates. And so I would just propose going 1 through 8 and see if anyone has any comments there. But to me, we've all taken the time to rank them, and those are the calculated totals. I think it makes the most sense to just 1 through 8.
Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen. Thumbs up. All right, so we will interview the first 8 candidates that are listed. So with that being said, we need to decide how to conduct the interview panels. So last year when we had this discussion, we had the conversation about how to conduct the panels, whether we should have all the applicants on one or if we should split them up. And last year we decided to have 6 applicants on one panel. So we have 8 this time. And my recommendation would be to split those into panels, 2 panels of 4. So any thoughts on that? Okay. Yes. Okay. All right, I'm seeing head nods and thumbs up. So we will split them into 2 panels of 4, and we will decide who are on those panels randomly. So in addition to this part of the discussion, one of the things that needs to be very clear, and we discussed this in agenda setting as well, is that we want to create an environment where it's fair for all of the candidates that are being interviewed. So we would obviously have a holding room for the candidates who are, for example, on the second panel to be interviewed, so that they're being monitored, they're not watching the interviews from another device or something to that effect, because it is a public meeting, and so it's a public process. And so that way it's fair across the board for all the candidates that are participating. And so they will sit in a holding room while the first panel is being interviewed, and then we will switch out. The other thing we discussed is the brutal process that we did last year was when we used ranked choice voting, and then we decided that we would do that process right in front of the candidates. So this time around, what we will do is excuse that second panel after we are finished interviewing them, and both of those panels can sit in the holding room until we go through our voting process. And then we will call the candidates back once a decision is made to announce our decision. So, yes, Councilmember Gilman.
So help me to understand, is it an executive session? How is it that they're excluded from the conversations? What I watched was vote after vote as they were narrowing it down to me and one other person to choose. And I thought it was a public deliberation, so I'm trying to.
It is a public deliberation amongst the council, but what we're doing is looking after the candidates and not putting them through the process of actually watching the voting take place in a public meeting right then and there. They will be in the holding room, and the public obviously can still see that process, and the candidates will be able to see it on a recording after the fact. But they don't need to sit there in real time and watch us do the voting and deciding who is going to be selected as the council member for the seat. So that's what I think will be the best approach to doing that process this time around. Something we've learned from the last time we appointed a council member who sat through that in real time and watched. Sure. Sure. But you got appointed, so we're looking out for everyone. Yes, City Manager Bernie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city attorney was poking me as we were having this conversation and was thinking about it since we had our conversation at noon. Another way you might consider this is to make it optional. So you could let the candidates know that if they want to stay and watch the voting, they can, or they may retire to another room if they don't want to do that. That way, no one can say that they were excluded from a public process in any way. It's just another way you could think about it. And then, yeah, maybe they're not they're not sitting at the table. They can be out in the audience while you do your voting. So they're kind of dismissed, and it's at their option whether they want to stay in the room or leave while you vote.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. So any additional thoughts on process of how we'll conduct the interviews? Okay. Yes, Councilmember Gilman.
Full of questions tonight, I apologize, but will we do the ranked choice after hearing the two panels, or will we narrow it down and have a lightning round with finalists? That we've done both over the years, so.
Well, that's the next part of our discussion, which is whether or not we're going to go with the ranked choice voting recommendation from the subcommittee.
Okay.
Councilmember Madrone.
Well, and we also discussed, doing the interviews and then having a moment for us to go into executive session so that we can deliberate on what we heard, and then we take our vote. So there'll be an opportunity for that. That's what we did last time. Yeah, and if at that moment, we choose, like, hey, we kind of want to hear from some of them a little bit more, we could do it at that time.
Yes, and just for those who are watching and listening, the reason for an executive session at that time would be to discuss qualifications of the finalists at that time. So how do we feel about using our approach that we've done for the past several appointments of using ranked choice voting? Yes, Councilmember Cooper.
I was wondering, after our experience last year, if there's a moment in time before it's revealed, if we could talk about qualifications or something and see the tie situation and have a conversation about how to move forward. Because I don't necessarily, even though I was on the prevailing side of the vote, appreciate ranked choice vote making a tiebreaker with only 6 voters. Like that is not necessarily the best outcome for me. We got a great council member out of it, but it's the only time of the 2 times that we've used it that there's been a tie. And so I just wanted to talk about that and make sure we understand how we want to deal with it. Because, my thought would be to get to the top 2 and then vote again, or do another quick panel. But that's just my impression, because I wouldn't have gone home if I was not on the prevailing side last year. I would have wanted to keep talking.
It's a fair point. Thank you, Councilmember Cooper. Councilmember Madrone.
I was not on the prevailing side, no offense. And I was very glad to have ranked choice voting break the tie for us instead of having us sit in executive session for however long it took for one person to change their mind, because it is 6 people. And so we could stay in a deadlock. until somebody feels like they have to change their mind just to be able to go home. So in my mind, ranked choice voting creates more, an easier way for us to come to a decision if it is a close vote.
It's a very good point. Councilmember Vanderpool.
If it comes to an exact tie, my recommendation would be to do more interview questions with those two people at that point. But otherwise, I think the ranked choice, just follow the ranked choice rules. That's just my recommendation.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments on this one? Well, I would say that I think you all raise great points. I think deciding to use ranked choice voting personally to break the tie sounds like the best approach to take using this process. I don't know how I feel about asking an additional set of questions to break the tie, because I think the numbers do that for us. Right. So I don't necessarily feel like I need to ask more questions to break a tie, but that's my 2 cents. If anyone else has thoughts. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Yeah, great discussion. Clearly, we really care about how this process is coming out. I'd love to take a little bit of what the mayor had said, a little bit of what other council members have said, and propose that we do ranked choice voting and let that ultimately be the tiebreaker. I think it's a clean process. I think the numbers will, I think part of what's baked into ranked choice voting is I don't foresee us having a tie situation, and if it does, then we'll go into executive session, and I think that we'll figure it out then.
Yes, Councilmember Cooper.
I should point out too, I think part of the problem, not a problem, but the reason we ended up, was easier to get a tie, I think, because there was only 4 candidates in the pool too. So bringing 8 people forward might help that. So I appreciate the discussion. I still want to do, what the group wants. I just wanted to make sure that we talked about it and thought it through, because if we're evenly divided, I think the voters expect that it's our job for somebody to vote to make a majority.
Yeah.
And we're doing that by agreeing that we'll accept the tie-breaking methodology from ranked choice voting.
Right, because we didn't agree to do that until it happened last time. Yeah, so this time we're doing that ahead of time, so that is a process improvement. Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Cooper. Any additional comments? All right. Seeing none, I saw some thumbs up and head nods about going with the subcommittee's recommendation to use ranked choice voting to select the next appointed council member through this process. Okay. Any additional comments from council on the applicants or anything that you wanted to speak to? Anyone? I will just say, first of all, I was very pleased to see that we had this many people that were interested in the vacant seat. I wasn't expecting it to be more than what we've had before, so that was really encouraging to see. I really appreciate the number of people that have come forward to apply. I was just speaking with Councilmember Cooper a few moments ago before the start of the meeting, and one of the things that I noticed was the number of applicants that had some sort of background in education. I found that very intriguing, and the number of applicants that mentioned they're concerned for our schools, which obviously shows that they're concerned for our youth. And while our schools are governed by a different body, it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have sort of some sort of a role in terms of how we engage with our school district, our colleagues that are on the board. And so I was looking for that in some of the responses of the applicants and the applications. So I really appreciated the thought of specifically really forward thinking in terms of caring about Olympia's youth and the future of our schools and our community. That stood out very clearly to me amongst this list of applicants. Another thing that I will say is that we're incredibly gifted and have a high number of qualified people who clearly could do this job as well as many others in the city. So we will be having our process for the city's advisory boards and commissions that will be going through this process in the coming months, where we'll have vacancies that we need to fill. And I encourage all of the applicants and ultimately those who are not selected for interview or ultimately appointed to really consider serving on one of the city's boards and commissions. We could use your expertise. I would say that if you are willing to serve here on council, then certainly you would have something to contribute and offer on one of our boards and commissions to ultimately advise the council. And so I just appreciate the number of folks that have come forward and identifying different reasons and issues for why they are seeking the appointment. Ranging from addressing housing and homelessness to addressing our local economy, and to addressing, to improving aspects of public safety in our community. All of that came through very clearly in our community, in some of the responses. It was clear to me that that there were some applicants that were very much paying attention to what we've done over the last year here at the city, specifically as it relates to the budget. It was very clear that there were a number of applicants who understood where we were at this time financially as a city, and in my opinion, I think that's very important for the next appointed member to have that as they step into that context and understanding as they step into the role of council member. So with that, are there any additional thoughts on the applicants that we got? Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. I was thinking about that. I think this is my 5th appointment that I've participated in, and I agree with you. This is by far the most qualified, air quotes, because we all know the only qualification is to be a registered voter in the city. But it's a really deep pool, and I think easily 2/3 of these people could walk into this job, learn it, and do as good as any of us. And so that's really encouraging, and I'm really excited about interviewing the top 8 because and it's an amazing set of people. So can I make a motion?
I believe Mayor Pro Tem, she has the motion in front of her.
Perfect.
And I do want to mention that we are to list the candidates by name within the motion so that we are very clear on who we will be interviewing next Monday.
Thank you for the kind reminder, Mayor. I would gladly move to approve appointment process and move to approve an interview process and the slate of applicants: Kelly Green, Jennifer Riedmeyer, Daniel Garcia, Bridget Valdez-Kogel, Isaac Wagnitz, Tanzania Zinzali Marshall, Zachary Lynch, and Timothy Leadingham, to move forward for interviews to fill the vacant city council position number 5 seat via ranked choice voting.
Is there a second? There is a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And again, I just want to express our congratulations to the candidates that have been selected for an interview, and we look forward to our discussion with you next Monday at 6 p.m. We will be conducting those interviews here in the council chambers on Monday, January 13th. All right. So that concludes our business on item 6A for this evening. We will go ahead and move to council reports. And I will just begin with the mayor's report and briefly state that I really tried my best to really dedicate time to my family at this time of year and take advantage of the time where most people sort of turn things off and the world just sort of slowly turns down for a bit and take advantage of that time. I did attend a few community events for the holidays, particularly the community Hanukkah menorah lighting at Port Plaza. And I'm pretty sure there were a few other meetings in there, but I did spend most of that time really trying to take a break so that I could show up for you the best way I could at the start of the new year. So that's my report, and I'll start to my right with Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, I just have one item to report, which I probably should have done at the last meeting, but I was so tired. I said I'll save it for the new year. But the lot board met on December 11th, and we had a few big things that we got through. We renewed an accord with the Squaxin Island tribe, and I'm very happy to say, that they borrowed a lot from our most recently updated accord, including the land acknowledgement that was approved by the tribe, and because Lot's service area is larger, they identified not just the Stachas watershed, but also New Seychelles, which is Henderson Inlet. And there's also, they actually have some really, I should say, because I'm on the board there, we have some really specific things. It's actually a lot longer than the one that we have with the city. But some, just a couple of things that I saw in here that I thought were really cool is a commitment to $525,000 towards some watershed restoration work over the next 6 years, in addition to the amount of funding that lot will be contributing to the Deschutes Estuary restoration, the long-term management there. But yeah, it was just really great. Ray Peters came and spoke at our meeting, and just really glad to see this partnership grow. We also agreed to a purchase and sale of property to the city of Lacey. It's surplus land for a lot that was no longer needed, and we did sell it at a discount from what the market value was. We sold it for what we paid for it, I think like 20 years ago, so it was worth a lot more, but with that reduced value came a commitment for it to be an affordable housing project, and I know the city of Lacey is working hard on that in partnership with a community organization to figure out how to get that developed. And then finally, the lot has been going through a strategic planning process for over a year, and that we completed that at the last meeting of the year. And so our next 6 years of our strategic plan has been completed. So that's my report.
Great, thanks, Councilmember Madrone. I do have a question about lot strategic plan. Are there aspects of that that have action items that pertain to engaging cities on specific actions to help them?
Well, there's areas that we partner with the city on closely anyway. It's kind of so some of it is just the standard work that lot does in terms of setting our rates and making sure that we're communicating with the cities around it. But there are a couple of community-oriented projects that we collaborate with the cities on. One of that is like septic to sewer, and making sure that there's funding, reduced costs to make sure that we're converting old houses that are on septic into the sewer system. And another example is the reduced connection fees for affordable housing. And so that was piloted in the past couple of years. And so an affordable housing project can have their connection fees with lot completely covered. And so we did extend that for that pilot into future years because it was very successful. And we wanna be a part of the solution there.
That's helpful, thanks. Any additional questions or comments for Councilmember Madrone? All right, seeing none. Councilmember Vanderpool.
I don't have any business to speak on tonight, but I would like to say that I'm looking forward to this year. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us. that are, you know, and I'm looking forward to discussing with and debating and going over issues this next year with the budget and other big issues such as the Workers' Bill of Rights. And I'm confident that we'll be able to work together to produce legislation that the public will see that'll help improve the quality of life for them, but also great trust in what local government can do. So I just kind of want to say that I'm looking forward to this next year. Now this is almost my first year here, and I look forward to all the work we can work on. So, thank you.
Thanks. Any additional questions or comments for Councilmember Vanderpool? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Always an okay time to stop and share well wishes and hopes, and I am also looking forward to working with you.
All right, Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. One item, yesterday I oriented as a new member of the County Board of Health. And my ears perked up at the lot report because at my first meeting, we're going to talk about ways that the water quality efforts can work on existing septic systems that are not in line for conversion. And it sounds like there's a particular focus on Henderson Inlet and residences near that. So I'm excited to begin that work, and I second everything Robert said. I was looking forward to this year.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments for Councilmember Gilman? Just thanks again for being willing to step up and serve on the Board of Health. We appreciate it. All right. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I happen to be talking to a leader over at South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity, and they sort of pitched an opportunity for Olympia City Council, and I'm hoping perhaps some ET members to schedule a time to come and do some sort of community build. I think that could be a really great bonding activity. Of course, that's a organization's mission goal that we as a council support. And at agenda setting today, someone mentioned, I didn't make the connection, but someone mentioned that it'd be, what a way to honor Jimmy Carter. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that was the mayor, for the record. So just sort of garnering interest, the city manager is following up with some details, detail gathering about that. So, and then another one is that I was pleased to see former council member Parsley's farewell email, but then also a couple of things to consider. And within those couple of things to consider, there was one around allowing within our city to allow pet daycares, essentially. And so that is something that I'm just sharing that I am interested in and seeing, you know, what would that take? How easy is that? What are any possible complications there? But so just sharing of interest. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Any comments or questions for Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen? Councilmember Madron.
It is something that we could throw on the to be scheduled list for the Land Use Committee if you're interested. I'm not sure that we could get to it this year with the comprehensive plan update, but when we put things on that to be scheduled list, they often pop up on the next work plan, but it can be there as a placeholder if there's interest from the council on that.
Thanks. Councilmember Cooper.
I would join you on a referral for that. So once you investigate and figure out what the obstacle and right timing is with the land use chair, sounds good. I think it's important that we try to have referrals for things that come to the agendas because then we know we're all clear on what the scope is.
Agreed. Thank you. Councilmember Vanderpool.
Yeah, I made note of that for our eventual conversation on land use. I think that knowing the scope of it will be important because there are other related and adjacent things such as restrictions on apartments and stuff that could also be part of that type of work, but we have to be very careful about over-scoping it. So I mean, depending on if we want to do focus this through referral or build something up for a larger thing. So I'm okay with either.
Yes, I would say that this topic definitely intrigues me as well. I will just say that I also think it's something that we should also make sure that we discuss in the retreat when we're looking at the rest of the items we have on the work plan for the year. And maybe that'll help guide some of the conversation around whether it's to be scheduled or, whether it's something we can get to sooner rather than later. Councilmember Madrone.
I will say I got a sneak peek at the land use work plan, which we're discussing next week, and it's likely a 2026 item.
Thanks for the heads up. All right, any additional questions or comments for the Mayor Pro Tem? Seeing none, Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. A couple of things. I just wanted to add to all of your gratitude. Working together this year will be awesome, especially once we complete the body. I had a great holiday. We stuck around town, and other than just one night, we went to the Oregon coast. But going downtown and going shopping and spending time with family, and I had my whole family here for a couple of days, my extended family last week, and my dad's a city council member in another town. My sister's a city clerk in California who runs city elections, so be glad that we don't have to do that. And then my other sister works for DSHS. So we just talk about government like the whole holiday, dinner and everything. But it's also really fun and neat to see people who know government and appreciate government come to Olympia and tell me how cool it is. And so, like, my sister stayed at the DoubleTree, and she's like, I got to pick a spot. I picked my room in the app, and I can see the marina. It's so cute. I think that's what we're going for. And it's just a proud moment. She sent me a picture of the new views on Fifth with the lights in the night from her room with the salmon, and was like, what is that? This downtown is so cute. I want to live here. And I'm trying to lure her back to Washington. So thanks for helping make Olympia awesome. And then lastly, I just want to thank the city manager for the desk calendar. I put it up on my desk at home where I work full time, for people that don't know, on Monday when I went back to work, and it saved me 10 clicks on my computer so far by just looking at that little piece of paper on my desk. So thank you. It is a beautiful piece of art, too.
Thanks. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Cooper? I do believe I saw something somewhere, like very briefly, that your dad's been appointed Mayor Pro Tem in Elma. So congratulations to Mayor Pro Tem Cooper in Elma. So with that, City Manager Bernie.
No official business to report. Just want to give some gratitude to Assistant City Manager Debbie Sullivan, who minded the store while I took some much needed and desired vacation around the holidays. And both Stacy and I were out the week between Christmas and New Year's, and Debbie was here. And I just want to thank Debbie for doing that for us. Just a funny story. Debbie missed us. And when Debbie's by herself, Debbie does a lot of thinking. And her whiteboard is full of stuff. So the good news is I came back and we have hit the ground running on retreat prep and just about everything else, because Debbie just has got everything organized while we were out. So I just want to give a lot of gratitude to Debbie because she's amazing.
Yes. Well, we'll second that. Thank you, Debbie, in advance. Can't wait to find out all the ways that you've helped guide us. Thank you. And while we're on the gratitude train, I'll just go ahead and extend that to Kelly as well for the appointment process. Obviously, we've, while we were all on break, obviously, Kelly, you've needed to do things to prepare us and review and rank all of our rankings and look at the ways that we've decided to interview and review the application. So we just appreciate all the work going into that. And as I told you earlier, it's like, you getting another advisory board or commission, at least temporarily on your list, which I know is a big thing. So thank you. All right. Any additional comments or questions for the city manager? Seeing none. So at this time, we are going to adjourn for an executive session pertaining to a real estate matter and also a personnel matter for up to 120 minutes in room 123. 423, excuse me. No decisions will be made, and after which we will be adjourned for the evening. It is now 6:49.